Josh, if mechanical engineering were a Pixar character, you would be Edna from The Incredibles.
Yes, darling, you're making it look so good. Welcome to Engineer vs. Designer,
the podcast.
Dealing design for engineers, designers, makers, geeks, freaks, and those who act out scenes of a bug's life to the chagrin of their friends. My name is Josh, mechanical engineer of SolidSmack.com.
And my name is Adam, industrial designer of CADJunkie.com.
Each week's show is broken into 3 squirrel-shaven halves. This week we're hitting up the CG scene, but first we'll hit the hottest stories in 3D CAD news and product design, courtesy of SolidSmack.com.
Followed by tips, tricks, and Q&A, compliments of CADJunkie.com.
And this week we have digital puppet maker and modo rigging master, Rich Hurrey of Pixar Animation Studios.
Rich, my man, if you could transfigure your left hand into any mechanical device, which one would you choose?
Probably a remote control.
Rich, we'll be hearing more from you as the show goes on. Josh Mings of SolidSmack.com. Assault our ignorance with your numbskull-piercing brain bullets. What have you got for us this week?
This week, SolidSmack News Blast is brought to you by Modo from Luxology, the designer-friendly 3D software that features subdivision surface modeling and a sweet renderer to help you sell your designs. For product design-specific examples, click the banner ad at EngineerVsDesigner.com. Prepare to rejoice, NX fans. Siemens has released NX8, bringing new direct editing enhancements, the ability to subdivide models for concurrent design, more pattern layouts, and some slick new multi-physics analysis solutions.
Things are heating up in the direct modeling scene as well. After an IP acquisition by the parent company of Brixis, direct modeling capability is out in Brixis V12, and in the same month, licensed to Ascon for the new version of Compass 3D. And for some context, this would be akin to Siemens acquiring Parasolid's IP and licensing that to other 3D software companies. Kind of a big deal and kind of a lot of brands to say in one sentence. I hope you could follow that.
3D Systems just gobbled up a Libre in July, but they're not lounging around. They've just released a Libre Design 2012. Features include a sporty new UI, faster sketching, and the ability to copy and paste surfaces from Rhino and Moment of Inspiration. Very cool.
Good old MOI. The 3D animation industry is a-growing in China. Shandong currently has over 800 comic animation companies, but they're adding a 3,000-acre outsourcing park to employ another 80K skilled workers for the animation sector in that country.
Techsoft 3D has rebranded Hoops 3D, which means company CEO Ron Fritz will need a new tattoo.
And Alexei Ershov, at 32, becomes the youngest CEO of Ledis, which means that Josh's chance is finally past forever.
Autodesk has acquired Alice Labs and their speedy point cloud tech used in Maya and Max plugins.
3D World is launching a new iOS app for iPad and iPhone. You can grab a free issue if you head over and download that right now.
And last but not least, our special guest Rich Hurrey has his new rigging master course out for Modo 501. It runs $199, but EVD listeners, you get a special discount. After October 24th, use the code RIGMODO, all one word, and you get a $25 discount on the training, and there's no time limit. Nice.
Nice. Rich, we're going to talk more about your career, design philosophy, and favorite cupcake recipes later in the show, but first, let's talk about this training course you just released via Luxology.com. And before I set you loose on that, I have to say 2 things. Number 1, none of our special guests on EVD pay anything whatsoever to be on the show. Rich is no exception. We are plugging his course because we honestly believe in it, and that leads to number 2. I have personally purchased this training without the $25 discount that our listeners get, and it is worth every stinking penny. So, disclaimers aside, Rich, we are going to dig deeper into this in the second segment, but from a 30,000-foot view, what is rigging and why should product designers care?
Rigging is abstraction. Rigging is saying I'm going to take a mess of elements and I'm going to make them move in a simple way. So you have a complex mechanism of some sort, and it can be a character, or it can be a pile of gears in a clock or something like that. And then you create a control so you can move one channel or one item, and all that system works around. So really, rigging at its simplest form is abstraction. It's taking some complex action and making it simple to use.
It's a way of controlling complex mechanisms. Yeah?
Yep. And, like what I do at work every day is that complex mechanism is a character, right?
Right.
And then what I developed in the training for 501 was dealing mostly with mechanical things. And what's interesting is that when you think about mechanical versus character, when you look at, a cartoon character that's done in 3D, its skeleton, it's the elements that make it move are really a mechanical device inside internally. So to me, it was the very first step. It was, building the foundation, getting the internal mechanical stuff working so that we can eventually move on to character stuff down the road.
Well, and I think this is a fantastic opportunity for product designers to embrace potentially a totally new way of working and thinking, and we're going to talk more about that later.
Before we cut, this is the second time we've actually recorded this show, because the first time Adam was recording outdoors when, well...
Fellas, we may have a problem pretty soon here because I'm getting rained on, FYI, and I just brought out my umbrella. So I'm sitting under an umbrella here to keep my computer and microphone dry, and I don't think I can put it away because it's raining too hard. Oh my god, this is ridiculous. It's like hardcore storming over here. Very soon I'm gonna have actually internet at my flat, and then this won't be a problem anymore. Wow, this is something for the history books. All right, guys. See ya.
Adam O'Hearn of CADJunkie.com. The massive skin sac surrounding your brain mass seems to be throbbing out of control. Quickly, impart some knowledge on us so your brain doesn't explode.
Did you just say throbbing skin sac on a on a podcast? That's awesome.
This week's CAD Junkie Q&A is brought to you by Modo from Luxology, which offers mind-numbingly fast modeling, rendering, and animation for your designs. The word about Modo is getting around fast. They've collected up some product design-specific examples just for you. Click on the banner at EngineerVsDesigner.com to check those out. Since we're sitting here with Rich Hurrey, Articulator over at Pixar Animation Studios, we figured we'd take a minute to dig a little bit deeper into workflows between CAD systems and a Modo rig. But first, let's just give a little bit of backstory for those who might be less familiar with the subject.
Indeed. So let's say I've built a giant mechanical robot assembly in SolidWorks. I used SolidWorks because, well, I'm going to be machining the parts to build a real-life robot I will then be using to knock down my noisy neighbor's house. But before I do that, I want to see how its limbs are going to articulate and maybe even do a few mock-up animations showing the robot, crushing cars, boats, small bridges, before actually doing the deed.
Right, so you have an assembly all constrained and ready to go in your CAD system of choice, and now it's time to make some pretty pictures. Well, you can do that in a CAD system. People build large, complex machines in CAD all the time, and it works pretty darn well. Obviously, CAD is made to do mechanical systems. But try posing a virtual action figure in traditional CAD, much less animating it, and you are going to be huddled in a corner, pulling your hair out and sobbing, "I'm a little black rain cloud," for at least 6 hours. Trust me,
it's
not
pretty. No, part of the problem is that most CAD systems struggle with fancy rigging concepts like inverse kinematics, which we'll talk about in a minute, but more importantly, the CAD experience is designed for making real-world objects, not animations and pretty pictures.
So they're just not made for that job, and this is where a visualization or viz package like Modo comes in. So to Modo, all those fancy solid bodies in your CAD system are really just a bunch of dumb meshes. It's just a mesh of points. And in this case, that's actually a really helpful thing.
It's dang good. So Rich, you have a lot of experience working with data from a wide variety of sources. Would it make sense for a product designer or engineer to go to the trouble of exporting CAD data to Modo for rigging?
Absolutely. Especially, Adam hit it right there when you're explaining it, is that, it's designed for that in mind, taking these elements, putting them together, and then making them animatable. And that was part of the reason I went into the training to start with, was to kind of say, hey, look at all the different things you can do, and then really break the tool set down.
So Josh, let me give you a really good example of this. I was working at a consultancy, and we had a whole bunch of gears with this complex clutching mechanism with a spring that compresses and then ratchets into place and all this kind of stuff. And we wanted to visualize that so that people could see this whole mechanism operating. And there were about 30 gears in there turning. It's crazy. And so what I was able to do in Modo, which I really couldn't maintain my sanity while doing in SolidWorks, was to bring those meshes into Modo, put a bunch of relationships between all those gears so that they worked. You could just rotate one gear and everything moved. But on top of that, the compression springs would deform and move. and all that kind of stuff. So you could really see what was going on as this thing animated.
You're not constrained by reality. You're not constrained by reality. You can make it look good, and that's a big difference between the two worlds. It's like in Modo, you're not restricted. You can do things that just are impossible physically, but maybe what looks good or helps illustrate what the problem, like doing a cutout. If you want to see the side of a gear and you still want it to turn and connect everything right, you don't have to worry about the gears actually connecting. You make it work. You build that relationship, and you can show it. It's just really great for that kind of thing.
And now that we have things like the recoil plugin for Modo, you can even do some physically based simulations as well. You want to drop a bunch of items into a bucket, you can do that now, and the interference is all calculated and everything. It's really actually becoming a pretty interesting potential design and engineering tool in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd want to build a bridge in Modo and have people walk across it. I can make it look really pretty.
Fair enough.
Look at this
Fair
bridge.
enough.
It's a great looking bridge. Better go into SolidWorks to make the bridge, though.
All right, so inverse kinematics from a very high level. What is inverse kinematics, and why does that make sense to know about?
Well, you should probably start with what forward kinematics is and where it all started, right? So forward kinematics is just a parenting situation. It's a hierarchy, right? You move your shoulder, and your elbow and your hand move along with it. You move your elbow, and the hand will move along with it. You move the hand, and it moves by itself, right? It's hierarchical. And inverse kinematics says, well, in real life, you kind of have a relationship between your wrist and your shoulder. When I pull the wrist, the elbow moves to compensate. So inverse kinematics says, all right, I'm going to look at the parenting from the other direction, inversely, basically, from the forward kinematic setup, so that you can move it around. It allows, and I give it in a character's context, arm and elbow. But, when you have big mechanisms that need to move or point, or like a robotic arm where you want the little arm to grab something and you want the back end to articulate and move along with it. That's really what it's designed for.
Right. So when we're talking about this big giant robot that's going to be crushing our neighbor's house, what we don't want to have to do is what we would do in CAD, which is where you would have to take the hip and rotate it, and then take the knee and rotate that, and then take the foot and rotate that, and try to line all those things up so that the foot is right on top of your neighbor's porch. That's
right.
But right, exactly. But with what you can do if you've rigged this up properly in Modos, you can do that backwards, where you can just grab the foot itself and just drag that to the porch, and then the hip and the knee articulate correctly.
Yeah, and what's interesting is, because you're dealing with kind of a skeleton, right? You're dealing with this inverse kinematics thing. You can then layer in all the complex mechanical stuff that has to happen on top of it. So if your robot leg has a bunch of little actuators and gears and things that spin, you can take the output of the inverse kinematics and plug it into all those other mechanisms, so they do interesting things as you're crushing your neighbor's house.
Adam, for the last time...
For the last time what?
What no Cheetos while recording. You're getting the airwaves all orange and sticky. Getting the airwaves all orange and sticky.
Yeah, fine. We'll be right back.
As you know, today we're sitting down with Rich Hurrey, modeler and articulator at Pixar Animation. Rich not only has worked with Pixar, but has also done work on the Matrix trilogy, Chronicles of Narnia, and all kinds of other 3D insanity.
Well, you brought him on because, in a weird way, as an articulator, he's sort of like the CG world equivalent of a mechanical engineer, and you can argue with me if you want, but he works really closely with art departments as well, definitely straddling that old engineer versus designer line.
Yeah, which may spark some impromptu Buzz Lightyear sounds in the background, which you can just ignore.
So is there any advice that you can offer to those who may use Modo for product design presentations and are curious to start utilizing more animation in those presentations? And, where do you start?
The thing is, when you're coming from CAD and you're going into the 3D animation stuff proper, you've got to learn how to take what you know language-wise and translate it over into this new world.
Yeah, and I'm going to interject really quickly and just say that, I often talk to product designers who are interested in learning Modo, and they ask me, should I learn it? How do I learn it? Etc. And I'm always very upfront and say that this is a significant learning curve. This is not easy, and it's not something you're going to learn over a weekend, before a project. This is something that is actually a big piece of software that's going to take serious time to learn.
Yeah, and the thing about what's nice about the way that the training was structured was to go, okay, and it's funny, I didn't design it for CAD people. That wasn't my intention at the time. It just after talking to Paul McCrory, he was like, CAD guys would really like this stuff. I'm like, really? It's like,
Yeah,
okay.
another plug for Paul, who has been on our show before, by the way.
Yeah, he's really cool. And so it was like, all right, it breaks it all down. Like you have a part that's just like, here, let's just teach you how modo works for animation. Let's just look at all the pieces and how it all works so you can understand kind of the thought process. And then I'm like, all right, let's take that and actually build something for real. Like let's actually build the program, right? And something like that, whether it's mine or another place, would be great for CAD people to get their hands on to learn how to speak modo. And then I think once you learn how to speak the language, you can then translate it. I mean, you understand spatial relationships as a CAD person. You understand how pieces fit together. And then it's just a matter of learning how to put the tools together in a different way. And then I really think it'll get addictive. If it's anything like Paul, he was IMing back and forth and we're chatting. He's like, it's like, because the training wasn't out and I'm just helping him out. And he was just like, oh, dude, that's awesome. And he was going in and he made some really awesome stuff in modo. Yeah, it's like he's really taken that stuff and run with it. It's very cool.
So yeah, I mean, this sounds awesome, Rich. I mean, but there are lots of competitors out there for modo. You mentioned that there are other possibilities in the market. Why would you choose modo and not, say, Maya or Lightwave or 3ds Max or any of the other million or so Viz packages out there?
I think for me, and even if you take the fact that, Brad was my boss back in the day, really, I just like the way modo is evolving, and I like their thought process. It's if you look at it in just a modeling context compared to other applications, it's a very gloves off. I can get down to the lowest level. I'm dealing with points as a single entity, and I can work from there. It's like it lets you get right into it, and the workflow is really designed, for efficient, content creation. And it's hard sometimes to explain. It's like, well, if you look at tool A in one app and tool A in the other app, it's like, well, they kind of look like the same thing. Hey, cool, you got a tool. But really, as you start getting in there, you realize that they've paid a lot of attention into your workflow, and all of a sudden you're creating these things using the similar tools much faster.
Now, the flip side of that, of course, is that with flexibility comes complexity, almost in every case. Would you say that's true in modo as well?
Yeah, I mean, you have more options to do certain things, but again, because they've done such a good job of trying to keep the workflow making sense, kind of once you get the idea of how to think like modo, you go, oh, okay. It's just it handles the complexity in I think a more elegant way than a lot of these other places where you're just surrounded by a billion different options to do things, and it seems like a little funky to get into the guts of stuff. So I mean, my personal opinion, that's what I like. I also like that I can't really guide them too much with where I work and stuff, that kind of thing. But I get to be kind of involved in where they're going, and I like the direction they're going, And so for me, I chose it because I really believe in where they're going with stuff and kind of their general philosophy of software development. I'm not a hater either. I've used other, I've used Lightwave, I've used Messiah, I've used Maya to do rigging and create work professionally. And I'm using modo because that's my preference, but not that I dislike or hate these other things,
Well, okay. Well, so obviously, I mean, working at a place like Pixar, or working at Pixar specifically, let's be honest, is a dream job for a lot of people, myself included. What is your favorite part?
My favorite part is being surrounded by people that are smarter than me. That everybody there is a rock star, right? And when I'm in my department, if I have a problem, I can go to anybody's office and ask a question, and they're gonna, if they don't know the answer, they'll work on trying to help me find it.
Well, Rich Hurrey, having you on the show has been even better than the time, and this is true, that I met John Lasseter at the Frankfurt Auto Show and squealed like a little schoolgirl at an NSYNC concert.
All right, no problem. Good talking to you guys.
Thanks so much for being on the show. And if you'd like to send bags of action figure weapons to EVDHQ, please address it to Adam.
He glues them to his face.
I do. I also glue comments to my face, and EngineerVsDesigner needs those. Give us your thoughts at EngineerVsDesigner.com. Insults welcome as always.
And if you desperately wish to see us shunned and publicly ostracized, be sure to like us, +1 us, follow us, or whatever else, as social media has also been correlated with having no life. We'll see you next week, and remember, without engineers, designers would be illustrators of beautiful fantasies.
And without designers, engineers would never be able to say their lines.
You are a sad, strange little man, and you have my pity. Farewell.